A comprehensive edit of your book likely requires more rounds of revisions than you initially thought it would. But as a professional book editor, I genuinely do not want you to fear the red pen. Embarking on the book editing process does take a lot of stamina, but I promise you, at the end of it, you're going to have a much stronger story that is better than you ever thought possible. So today I'm going to give you an overview of all the different editing stages, broken down into the 2 key phases of book editing. My goal is to help you understand what to expect going into the book publication process and help you understand all of the industry terminology so you can hit the ground running with revisions and help your story reach its maximum potential. If you're anywhere along the book writing or publishing journey, I recommend subscribing to my channel and joining our amazing community of authors. Every week, I either give tactical writing advice or I talk about the publishing industry since that's my professional background, and I'd love to have you join us. One quick thing before we dive in, if you can hit that thumbs up button, it's a small thing, but it helps my channel in a big way, and I really appreciate it. Okay, let's talk about phase 1 of book editing, which is what I call structural or substantive editing. This is the first phase of editing, and it focuses on all the big picture elements of your story, all the foundational building blocks that make your story what it is, rather than line level issues like grammar and spelling. As I go through all the phases and types of book editing, I want you to picture it like a funnel graphic. We're going to start at the top and work our way down. So substantive or structural editing falls in the top section. Some areas that this phase of editing will focus on include pacing, plot holes, character development, structure, POV, themes, resolution, length. This is the type of editing that I personally specialize in, and it is the type of editing that most literary agents and acquiring editors at publishing houses also specialize in. You may find yourself going through multiple different rounds of editing within this structural editing phase, either on your own or with critique partners or with a professional editor, to address all the big picture issues in your story. The goal with this type of editing is to make sure all the foundational elements of the story are strong to hold everything up. Now I want to talk about the 2 primary forms of structural or substantive editing. The first is an editorial assessment, which can also be referred to as a manuscript evaluation or manuscript critique, even an editorial letter. This is a detailed document going through all the foundational elements of your story and evaluating them for opportunities of improvement. This is typically the first type of edit a manuscript will go through. We're still operating at the very top of that funnel here. Since at this phase, so much of the manuscript text itself could still change, we don't want to jump the gun and dive into specific scenes before we know that that scene is even going to belong in the draft, right? We're talking big picture things here. Are all the POVs included the ones that should be included? Does the plot make sense and hold up? Are the main characters going through a compelling transformative arc? Do we need to add characters, omit characters? Do we need to change the ending? Do we need to trim 30,000 words off? These are the big picture elements we are dealing with at the editorial assessment phase. Once you have finished a draft and you have gone through as much self-editing as you can and you really need an external set of eyes on the book, that's when I recommend getting an editorial assessment. It will give you a comprehensive understanding of all the foundational aspects of your story, as well as which ones you could improve to fully realize your vision for the story. A strong editorial assessment is also going to provide specific revision suggestions to give you a roadmap for what to do with the story. Once the editorial assessment is complete, the next level of editing would be developmental editing. This involves inline comments in the manuscript itself, typically via a software like Word's tracked changes. Here, the editor is flagging specific lines of text in the story, making comments about the placement of different scenes, the order of scenes, the length of scenes, how a character is being portrayed, the effectiveness of a dialogue exchange, etc. They might suggest moving scenes around, condensing some scenes, expanding some scenes. The goal of the developmental edit is to improve the overall flow of the story and ensure that every single scene in the story is there for a reason and earns its place on the page. If there aren't scenes that need to be there, we need to add them in. If there are scenes there that shouldn't be there, we need to take them out. I recommend diving into developmental editing after you've had an editorial assessment, because ideally the larger picture issues will have been dealt with at the editorial assessment phase. So you and your editor can dive into specific scene level issues in the developmental edit. I have another video that gets into the differences between an editorial assessment and a developmental edit in more detail, so I'll link that in the description if you want to check that out. If you've been enjoying my videos, I have great news. There is so much more content waiting for you on my newsletter website, chapter-break.com. I'm publishing exclusive interviews with best-selling authors and literary agents, and I'm doing deep dives into specific editorial issues from my background as a developmental book editor. It's completely free to subscribe, and as a bonus, you will get my story self-assessment worksheet, which is a quiz I designed to help you get unstuck with your current work in progress and identify those big picture story issues that you can then drill into and improve for the next draft to make the book even stronger. The links to download your free story self-assessment and check out Chapter Break are in the description. Now let's get into phase 2 of the editing process, which involves the different types of sentence level editing. Once all the overarching story elements are in place due to the work you've done through the editorial assessment and the developmental edit, now you can move on to the 3 next phases of editing that I bucket under sentence level editing. Here, we are more concerned with the text itself. While developmental editing focuses on achieving your vision for the story, delivering an effective reader experience, and making your story reach its full potential, line editing is helping you improve the prose itself. This is the type of editing that many authors think of when they think they're getting their book edited. But remember that you don't want to dive into sentence level editing prematurely and skip over all the structural and developmental level work. Because if you do so, you might be working on refining and revising sentences that might not even make it into the final draft. I am all about editing efficiently, which is why I like to follow the funnel. So the next level in our funnel after editorial assessment and developmental edit is a line edit. Line editing aims to polish the prose on a sentence and paragraph level. In a line edit, you'll focus on word choice, sentence structure, clarity, continuity issues, dialogue issues, tone consistency, etc. During the line edit, you might fix some grammatical issues or spelling issues as you go, but that's not the focus of this type of edit. You want to make sure your prose sings and that each and every sentence packs a punch and every word matters. If you are working with an editor, rest assured that they are going to be working to retain your unique voice, even as they are making line level suggestions. The next level of editing is copy editing. In a copy edit, you are going to dive deep into grammar, syntax, spelling, and formatting to ensure correctness and enhancing the clarity and readability of the story. While line editing is focusing more on the content and the style of your sentences, copy editing is more about the technical correctness. This is an opportunity to really tighten up your writing at the sentence level. I typically recommend working with a different copy editor than your developmental editor, even potentially your line editor, because a copy edit is a very specific type of edit and requires someone who is trained in grammar. Plus, it can really help to get totally fresh eyes on the manuscript at this point, because you or your other editors might be too close to it to really see those more detailed issues. Your copy editor will typically provide a style sheet that includes your book's house style for all your formatting requirements. Lastly, at the very tip of the funnel is proofreading. This is a final meticulous check for any spelling or grammar issues. By the time that you get to a proofread, the manuscript should be quite polished already. It's really a final quality control check to dot your I's and cross your T's. I also recommend working with a wholly new editor for the final proofread. Again, so you get fresh eyes on the manuscript at this point to catch any of those things that might have passed by the other editors who have already been through it. Whew, okay. Are you still with me? Now that we have gone through all the different editing phases, I want to reiterate your roadmap for revising your book. Now, the editing process will vary somewhat depending on every book's needs, as well as depending on your publication goals. If you're self-publishing, it will be important to go through all of the editorial phases that I just laid out if you want to put out a polished product. If you are querying literary agents, I recommend going through the substantive or structural editing phase at a minimum to make sure the manuscript really is as strong as possible to present literary agents, but you will go through many, if not all, of these editing phases with the publisher who eventually makes you a book deal. So to reiterate, the phases of editing begin with the editorial assessment, then go into developmental editing, then line editing, then copy editing, then proofreading. In general, you start with the big picture edits and work your way down to the sentence level and then word level corrections. This process is not necessarily perfectly linear. However, you could go through multiple rounds of developmental editing before you drill down into sentence level editing, or multiple rounds of line editing, for instance. I know it sounds like a lot, and it is. Writing a book is not for the faint of heart, and neither is revising one. But I promise you that each of these editing phases is crucial to making your book as strong as it can possibly be. Now I want to briefly go through a few other types of editing or reviews you might get on your manuscript through the book publishing process. The first is sensitivity reading. This type of read ensures that any cultural, social, or identity-related representation in your book is accurate, and that it is respectful and free from any harmful stereotypes. If your book deals with themes or representations that require a cultural awareness that is outside of your own lived experience, then it can be beneficial to work with a sensitivity reader who has that experience and that understanding. Typically, you would integrate this either just before or just after the line editing phase, though it really is never too early to get a sensitivity read if you determine that you need one or would like one for your book. Another type of editing is fact-checking. This verifies the factual information portrayed in the book, dates, historical events, etc. And it is especially critical for nonfiction, but it could be used for fiction that incorporates historical elements as well, such as if your protagonist is a marine biologist in the 60s and you want to make sure that the science is portrayed accurately. This would typically occur with the line edit. And lastly, another type of review you could get for your manuscript is a beta read. This is not a formal edit, but a beta read is essentially a way to check your work against specific readers who are your target audience. So typically you would give it to someone who you would like to be a reader for your book, and they will give you a gut check on if it aligns with the genre as they expected it to, what they liked about it, what they didn't like, getting those broad strokes impressions, and see how the story is resonating with potential readers. A beta read could happen at any point in the editing process, but typically happens at the substantive structural level editing phases. I hope this video helped you better understand the book editing process and what it all entails, and why each and every phase of editing is critical to your book success. So let me know in the comments where you are currently at in your stage of editing, or if you're still drafting, let me know that as well. And if you want to hear more about the specific editing I specialize in, check out my video on developmental editing and why I think every author needs a developmental edit. Before you head out, please give me a thumbs up if you liked today's video. Don't forget your free story self-assessment worksheet waiting for you in the description below and my newsletter link, and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on my next video. Thanks so much for watching, and happy writing.